Hey, have you ever wondered what it really means to be discipled or to disciple someone else? In today's world, we hear a lot about mentors and influencers, but biblical discipleship is something much deeper. In this episode, I'm joined by Patrick Flanigan as we explore why discipleship is essential to the Christian life, how it helps us navigate doubt and hardship, and what it looks like to faithfully invest in the spiritual growth of others. So, whether you're looking for someone to walk alongside you or wondering how God might use you in someone else's life, I think you'll find this conversation both encouraging and challenging.
Welcome to The Art of Relationships. This podcast is produced by the Biola University Center for Marriage and Relationships. Let's get right into it.
So, we're walking on this podcast with my friend Patrick Flanigan. Patrick is joining us all the way from, I don't know where, Ohio, probably. Was that right, Patrick?
That's right, Ohio State.
Ohio State. Patrick is a student at Ohio State after he transferred from the world's greatest university, Biola University, to this school that really doesn't really have much going for it. The football team is, they're better than Biola's, that's for sure. Even though Biola has been undefeated in football for over 140 years.
Oh, I remember that joke, trust me.
Excuse me. Yeah, we don't have a football team. And you transferred to one of the greatest universities there is in America. How was that? You left the beautiful confines, not only of the campus, but my classroom. And I think we met a few times and you're like, oh, that's plenty enough for me, man. I'm out of here. So how was that transfer to Ohio State? I know you did it with good intentions and a good heart.
Mm. Yeah, I think it was really difficult. It was learning to trust the Lord in a lot of ways, but I saw God come in my life and do some pretty amazing things. So it was difficult, but it was worth it.
Oh, no doubt, Patrick. And I know your family's from Ohio State and your dad even has a connection there.
That could be putting it mildly, yes.
Tell us real quickly. This isn't the topic of your dad the whole time, but he's got a great position there at the university.
Actually, it's interesting you bring that up because it's a really great segue into talking about discipleship. But my dad is the team doc for the Ohio State football team.
Wait, you just said it the right way. Ohio State.
The Ohio State. You got to have the. We tried to trademark the V, and I don't think we got it, but we tried.
Trademark the V. That boy, could you imagine this? Probably the third most used word in the English language.
Hey, but we tried though. So,
so tell us what happened with your dad or what he does.
Yeah, so he is one of the team docs for the football team, which means he gets a lot of opportunity to not only help these athletes with some injuries and some I say disappointing games and everything, but also to be a voice of faith there and a voice of mentorship that can help them shape them as men as well is the goal. And so it's a position with a lot of influence, but also with a lot of influence comes a lot of potential to do good.
Yeah, and that has really kind of been something that was ingrained in you from a young age. You stood on those sidelines in the stands, and you saw the impact your dad was having on these young men.
Yeah, well, he got the football recently. It was hockey before that, but yeah, a lifetime Ohio State for sure.
A lot of injuries, either sport, right?
Oh yeah, lots of injuries.
And Patrick, tell me how that kind of shaped a little bit, shaped you a little bit, because there's this notion out there that discipleship and mentorship and are really the same thing, but I don't think they are they?
No, I think they're definitely not. I think there's a lot of differences for sure.
Yeah, tell me what those are. Here you have, I would think you mean like we have biblical discipleship, right? And then it feels like there's more worldly mentorship. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think worldly mentorship is always tied around some kind of quid pro quo, whether it's in a career or in a friendship, there's always some element of I can mentor you, but in a way that sometimes looks good in my career, or looks good in my social circle, or whatever it may be. And biblical discipleship is really a lot more like wholesale. It's kind of the whole person. It's mentoring your spirit. And a lot of times, biblical mentorship or discipleship has nothing to do with what you can get out of it. It's just something that you give, right? And so I think there's a lot of big differences, but I think that's probably one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, and just staying with that for a little bit, what did you see early on? Did you see more of one or the other growing up, or in your time as a student at a couple of different places?
Yeah, so I think it's so common to see people that want to mentor you. I think it's a lot more rare to see people that want to disciple you. So I think I've seen a lot of people that, have mentored me professionally or in a bunch of other different ways, but the people that have been willing to disciple me are much fewer and far between. But
Is it because it's harder, or there are less biblical disciplers around, or why is that?
yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple of things. I think one is that to disciple someone requires being willing to be inconvenienced. And that's something that in our American mentality of independence and comfort is not something a lot of people are willing to do, or they don't feel like they need to do it. And so it may be one of those things where it's just kind of culturally not super common in our day and age, but when it is there, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it feels like you replace the quid pro quo, I'll do this for you, you do this for me, kind of, I guess transaction that we're used to. And it feels like there's a difference in the heart, or at least where you go, right? I mean, if I'm mentoring you, right, and you want to become the next Chris Grace, well, first of all, good luck, right? But second of all, I would start to go, oh, okay, Patrick, try these classes and make sure you get this good experience and this good internship, and I'll help you write a good, letter to a grad school. But you need to make sure and get out there and do these. I mean, that's great mentorship.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's on a worldly standard, that's exactly what you're looking for sure.
Yeah, and so where would we go different? So I guess I would, if I'm mentoring, you, I think the world can see that. But you're talking about a person that will step into our lives and begin to ask the deep heart, kind of soul searching questions. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think like one of the things that makes discipleship so unique is realizing that there is a lot more to life than just career, right? Or like, and that's one of the things where if someone's like you were talking about mentoring me with a recommendation letter or something, that's great, and I could get into the best graduate school in the world and have a great career, but there's more to life than that. And so that mentorship stops at a point that a discipler can keep you going on.
Yeah, and so expand on that moment now where you have been mentored. I know you have, but it's rare to find that person that will step up and do the discipleship. Is because they're not ready, they don't know how, or you just didn't know how to ask for someone.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times it's all of those. I do think there's a role on the person being discipled to be proactive and to ask for someone to disciple them. You know, I think there's definitely an initiative role there, but I think yeah, a lot of times some people are just not ready or maybe not even aware that they can be doing that to someone, like for someone. You know.
Yeah, and when that happens, something occurs when you finally find or get that mentor, so, or that disciple, or so. The interesting thing, Patrick, I was, not a Christian growing up, and finally in college I meet Jesus because a guy from the Navigators Ministry stopped me in a registration line, and he asked me a couple questions about God, discerned immediately that I was a non-believer, partying, jock and mob wannabe, and he discerned that, shared the gospel with me in my dorm room a couple of days or weeks later, and man, not only did the scales fall off my eyes spiritually, but he began an immediate, intentional discipling of me. And I mean, I came from, non-church, no, I just didn't have not only did I not have, any models of who Christians were. I didn't have a Bible, I didn't have the Christianese, I didn't have anything. But man, I'm telling you, within 3 days of that moment, I'm having a quiet time. I'm reading my Bible. I'm learning how to pray. And within 2 weeks, Patrick, he's telling me to go out and share my faith with somebody. And I'm like, wait. What do you mean share? What does that mean? Like, do I like a Venmo exchange? What does share mean?
Hey, they didn't have Venmo back then. Come on.
They didn't even have the internet back then. I'm sure we still use paper and pencil. I guarantee you. But all that to say, he throws me out into this world where but he didn't leave me alone. He taught me how to do it, took me with him, and man, some of those conversations I had were amazing in those early days because I didn't know anything except for, this, the great hound of heaven had tracked me down finally and shown me, what grace was and who Jesus was. But without his discipling, I don't know where I would have been. And Patrick, I think there are a lot of new Christians out there, non-believers, who have so many doubts and concerns about life. And that's what a disciple is trained and specially called to do.
Mm, absolutely.
And would you then tell me a little bit about how does having how does discipleship like that help you? Like you have a lot of doubts at times, even if you've been walking with Jesus a long time, man, right? All of us
Mm.
have anxieties and fears. But how does discipleship help you with things like doubt and life's trials?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot, but one of the biggest ones is that it gives you a model to look at. So a lot of times when you're, especially a young Christian, you're trying to figure out how do I live this Christian life? What does it look like to be a Christian, especially in, this field or in this situation or in this school? And, even a lot of times people have doubts on like assurance of salvation. Like, how do I know that I'm actually saved? And what being discipled allows you to do is allows you to have a model that you can look at, someone who's further along in that journey than you could see how they've made that path there, right? And what's great about that is a lot of times when you're trying to figure those questions out on your own, you're not going to have the resources to do so without that person discipling you because you don't know what it looks like 20 years down the road or 30 years down the road. But when you have someone discipling you, you can see like, okay, I might not know what right now looks like, but I can see where I'm going. I can see what it's like to live that life faithfully. And I think that's something you cannot like give enough credit for on how valuable that is.
Man, I remember it's almost like you had to pry my fingers off of this guy's screen door because because he had this walk with Jesus that was authentic. He loved his wife. They were in ministry together, and I had never seen anything like that. Growing up, I didn't know a single person who had a Bible, who prayed, the only time I heard the words God or Jesus were, I guarantee you, when something bad happened, when people were drunk or people were angry. That's the only time in my house I heard those two, three words, God and Jesus Christ. And so I saw this, Patrick, the new model, new way, like you're describing. And there was something in my soul that went, this is it. This is who you need to model your life after, right? And there's something that hits that young, new, or even old person, right, kind of where they're needing the most watering or the most modeling. And it's a high call, isn't it, to be a discipler? Because could you imagine your whole life is now going to be examined? Does that ever stress you out, or people that want to go into discipling? Do they ever think, I'm not perfect enough? If people look at my model, they're going to go the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really like two things to that. Firstly, I think we're all called to be disciplers. That's the Great Commission. It says, go and make disciples, not go and make converts, right? And so I think that's something that we're all called to do. But I also think when it talks about like your life being in the spotlight, so to speak, scripture repeatedly talks about, when God judges, everything that's in the dark comes to light. And I think part of the Christian life is supposed to be that we're not supposed to have those things in the dark. And so our life should be on the inside what it's like on the outside. And I think as we grow in sanctification, it naturally becomes more like that as well.
Yeah, that's really good. Expand on that a little bit. Like, so what is the role of the discipler, right? And then the role of the person being discipled?
Yeah, so I think that differs a little on who you ask, but I always like to look at like Paul and Timothy because I think in scripture that's a great example. But like one of the things is that Paul was writing to encourage Timothy. Paul was intimately involved in Timothy's faith and his personal life as well, and he became like a father, like to him, right? And in obviously in the church, that is like literally essentially what he is. But it's kind of that idea of he's walking with him every step of the way, like he's his son, right? And he's training him up in godliness so that when Paul's gone, when Paul's executed under Nero, Timothy can keep doing what Paul's work was, right? He can keep spreading the gospel, he can keep planting churches. And but it also means that when Paul's gone, Timothy is essentially ready. He's been trained to be the next Paul, right? And so in the early church, they had this idea, it was called apostolic succession. And it was essentially that most of these churches were founded by the apostles, and then the bishops were mentored by the apostles, and it continued on. And then that gets a little complicated later on, especially if you're talking Catholics and Protestants. But the idea was essentially that these guys were mentored by the disciples so that they could be a replica of the disciples when they weren't there anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Wouldn't that be awesome to be discipled by? Well, okay, no. How horrible. Okay, I don't know the right word to be discipled by Paul or even Timothy. I mean, good night. You'd be like, but Paul, I think, really broke the model. In Romans 7 and 8 when he said, "Woe is me! I'm a wretched man." Imagine a model saying to you, "Woe is me, I'm a wretched man, but thanks be to God where there is now no condemnation." I mean, if you talk about setting up a humble interaction with another person versus, "Hey, Patrick, I got three verses I want to share with you, two I want you to memorize, and four things I want you to write, on the sovereign nature of God's grace," right? And you're like, all right, but that's not really what we're looking for, are we?
No, and I think that because that can push you more toward mentorship, right? Where it's learning something, where it's discipleship is about being something. So I think it's definitely different for sure. And what you talked about in Romans 7 is huge because one of the things that's so important in that relationship is honesty. The person being discipled has to be honest with the person trying to disciple them. And the person discipling them has to also be honest with the person they're discipling. Because if you don't have honesty, you can't have any kind of relationship.
Man, Patrick, that's great. No wonder you got your own podcast and broad, metrics out there of people watching and listening to you. And I know it's growing because here you are. I mean, I don't want to reveal if you don't how old you are. I know you're 40 and we're almost the same age, but no, you're just a young dude and this is what impressed me, Patrick, about you. You were in my class and I don't know, were there 300-400 in there? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think like 350 or something. Yeah.
And Patrick, you stood out. One, because while you did smile and laugh at my jokes, which were aplenty, I'll be honest, maybe too much, but you would be amazed at what faculty can see while they're teaching 350 students. Man, we could pick up that dude, that is, sleeping or angry or reflective. The happy ones, okay, great, but you had this mixture of both, laughing and engaged, but very reflective and deep. And but here you are, just I don't know if you want to tell us how old, but you're still young and you have these thoughts on discipleship that is very different than the modern church or the young students that I come across have. And that's what stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Lord has put a call in my life, and the Lord has blessed me with a lot of challenges, but also a lot of ways where I've seen Him work in places that a lot of people wouldn't have. And I think that that has impacted me to one of the things I've tattooed on my arms is the parable of the talent. and it's impacted me to do what I can with what I'm given.
Hey, friends, we have got some big news. The Center for Marriage and Relationships is now part of Talbot School of Theology right here at Biola University.
We're thrilled, Lisa, with that because Talbot's been equipping leaders, in biblical truth for decades.
Yeah.
And now together we get to expand our resources for marriages and relationships.
Yeah, it's exciting because research shows that couples with ongoing support and biblical guidance are far more likely to thrive. And that's exactly what makes this partnership possible.
Yeah, so if you're a student, pastor, or just hungry to grow, we want you to know this is only the beginning of what God is doing through Talbot and the CMR.
Yeah, you can learn more. Just check out the show notes for details.
Yeah. Hey, let's go back real quickly to the idea of honesty. Expand on that just a little bit, because what you're saying in Romans 7 and ultimately what we find throughout Paul's writings is a deep honesty, but it wasn't like, hey, an honesty that the world, it wasn't like, he always, tipped the right amount, or he, always gave, if someone gave him too much change, that's honesty, right? It wasn't like when he interacted with others, he was honest. There's the more to that word. What does that mean when someone is setting out to both be discipled and or to disciple someone? What does that word mean to you, honesty?
Yeah, so I think we can go pretty deep with that, but I think there's a desire that everyone has to be fully seen and fully loved, right? And I think the problem with that is, to be fully loved in the world, you have to kind of tweak and modify how much you can be fully seen. Because if it's too much, then things go out of whack, and there's all sorts of issues with that too. But the idea of honesty is you have to be willing to be yourself, to review, to reveal things about yourself, to be honest, before the person discipling you, because they can't help you if they don't know, right? Like, if you're struggling with a certain thing, they can't help you speak into that if you're not going to tell them about it, right? But the problem is, it's so difficult to do that because the fear is always that that person is not going to be there if you tell them that thing, right? It's a fear of, okay, well, if I am honest, then they're not going to still be there. They're not going to see me the same way. They're not going to help me with this, right? And so what that tends to do a lot of times is it tends to make it so you have people that are being discipled that are being partially honest with the person discipling them. And there's a lack of healing a lot of times in that space, because the person that's trying to disciple them can't actually access what they need to be discipled in, right? And so I think honesty is especially on the part of the person being discipled, is being willing to take that first step, in that it's honestly a step of faith. It's a step of faith that the person that is discipling you is a believer in the Lord, and that they're going to love you as a brother in Christ, regardless of what it is that you need to be honest about.
Man, that's really good. Yeah, drop the mic right there while it's hanging. So maybe swing it out of there. Yeah, let's camp here for a second. Give me a time where you felt that tension. Someone is, appropriately, seeking your heart, seeking who you are, but you feel the tension of really not feeling comfortable revealing everything yet. What's that tension like?
Yes. Yeah, I think I have a few. I think one of them was this guy that has mentored me, and I tell him a lot of things, but like, for whatever reason, I was never, like, I have some sketchy things in my past. I was never able to tell him that whole thing, right? And I don't know why that was, right? But I was just never able to get there. And it was kind of one of those things where it was a good example of that situation, I would say.
Yeah. So why don't you tell the listeners all the sketchy things that you've done in your life? I mean, come on, we got to make this real, bro. This is come to Jesus moment. Let's just get it all. No, I so agree with you that it's there are so this person would ask me, and I being a new Christian, I thought, wow, this guy is taking a really interesting, good, I guess, interaction with me, and taking a turn that was pretty deep. So I just felt it was normal. But after a while, Patrick, as I started to try and walk with Jesus more, I remember him asking, "How are your quiet times?" For example, how's your time in the Word? Well, I never could live up to the model of what he provided. This man would get up 6 a.m., have his coffee, and be in the Word for an hour. And he'd be reading and praying, and then his wife would join him. And then, and he did that every day, and he kept notes about his, journal of thoughts and the prayers. Patrick, I tried and tried and tried to get up early and have a quiet time to start my day. And I mostly failed. So for me, I began to, that shame and guilt can start coming in, and that tension now arose. Hey, how's your quiet time? And I'd say, oh yeah, pretty good. Well, in reality, I had moved completely all of my quiet times to the evening when I was finally relaxing. It was before bed. I felt, closer to God there because I'm a night owl. And I remember having to finally have that conversation with him, say, "Rob, I'm just going to be honest with you. I am failing miserably at the 6 a.m. quiet time." And I really did feel like, because I didn't know any different. I thought that's what all Christians are supposed to do. You start your day. Jesus did it even before sunrise, and it was just, there were all these examples that he would share, with me and my buddies about, doing that early. Patrick, I remember the shame and guilt, and that's not what this is about, is it?
No, and I think because like in things like that, it's part of is like learning how do you connect with God the most, right? Or like in what spaces, and that's different for people with different personalities, I think. But I think a lot of times it's that vulnerability of being known, and there can be some shame involved in that too. But yeah, I mean it's definitely interesting because there is some commonalities, but also some differences, I think.
Yeah, and if you have a rough, sketchy background like you and I do, one thing we share is sketch. Right? I don't know the right term that all y'all use.
No, I love sketch. Sketch is great.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been reading, lingo for 50-year-olds to connect with that. So no, the sketch in our lives uh, is, it starts to come off, right? I mean, that the rocks around my heart, around my soul, were encrusted. They're hard, and that refiner's fire comes in and starts to reveal and knock away, or want to knock away. And I remember starting to resist, like, wait, I can no longer date these kind of girls. That one, I'm gonna be honest, was hard for me. Like, wait, you want to tell me that she has to be a Christian? I don't get that, because that wasn't my top four list of the girl I wanted to date. But it became that, I realized, oh, I have some other things. And so I remember, Patrick, kind of staying with the girl that I had been with before I became a Christian, and processing heavily, do I break this up? Do I break this off? Because it's not, my new definition of healthy dating, it didn't fit that.
Mm.
I don't know if you experience things like we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think I definitely have experiences like that as well. And I think what's been so interesting to see is that as you are able to be more vulnerable or more willing to follow Christ in those ways, you see how God changes that into testimony, right? And especially the case with vulnerability, as kind of God removes some of those rocks from your heart, it's become something you can share as a testimony that helps other people in the same situation.
Well, isn't that? I mean, the more vulnerable we can be, right? The more authentic, honest, the word we're coming back to now, the more I can, and by that, just saying, look, I don't have, as the discipler, to say these sentences. Look, I don't have this all figured out. I still struggle daily with keeping, my thoughts pure. I still struggle daily, hourly with the desire of wanting to be served instead of to serve. And that's the vulnerability and honesty that really helped me. Was I had maybe idolized this man's walk and his marriage and everything, and I had a great kind of eye-opening moment when he would share vulnerabilities and share honestly. Then I realized, oh, this is this Christian walk doesn't solve everything. It doesn't,
Mm.
all of a sudden you become a Christian, Patrick, and you think, oh, that's it. Life's over. But boy, for me, the great pursuer of grace, the hound of heaven, man, it was just starting. I thought it was the bottom of the ninth. And, I've been living in that world for 9 good innings, 19 at that point. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I just won the game, baby. I know Jesus now for the first time, and life is going to be perfect. And that's what I thought. And when it started to show that it wasn't, is when I realized, wait a minute, the top of the first has just started. The pitcher's in his windup, and I haven't even seen the first pitch yet. So when you do
Mm.
this discipling with people, Patrick, tell me what it means for you. Like, it seems, would you agree that the modern church has lost this kind of idea of discipleship with honesty and authenticity, and it's game on right now?
No, I absolutely agree with that. And one of the things I was blessed with this last year was at Ohio State to be around a lot of new Christians and like young converts. And what was so cool to see with that is the passion they have for the Lord. But on the other hand, this is where you're talking about the value of having the discipler who can be honest with them. Is sometimes there's a lot of optimism, but sometimes there's a little bit of realism needed as well. Of like, okay, this walk with Christ is maybe not going to be sunshine and rainbows all the time, and there are some issues that still happen. But what's amazing though is those young Christians were able to give me a kind of optimism and like a hope that I didn't have in my faith being longer, and I was able to give them a kind of grounded realism that they didn't have. So you have something where we each kind of benefited in different ways, and that helped us. I think us both grew. You know.
Boy, Patrick, when I was your age, finishing up my undergrad and deciding to go to grad school, I was thoroughly indoctrinated in a good way into the new Christian life and the disciple making, outline and format. I mean, coming from probably one of the premier Christian organizations that does that, the Navigators. I mean, that's their mission, is disciple making. And so I was thoroughly, soaked in that world. And so at that age, I started, I had guys underneath, mentors. We lived in the same house. I was a grad student. They were undergrads, and they got to see the raw, the unfiltered, and I remember one situation, Patrick, and I don't know if you've ever found this, but so there were two guys in particular. One was named Jim, and the other was named Kurt. Just guys that I've loved and still love today. And but I was I was a little bit older, been around in the faith maybe about as long as they have, and they were easy. These guys loved Jesus and walked with him. Okay, so the three of us took a trip out from Colorado to California one time, San Diego, to visit Kurt's brother in the Navy. We got to, he'd go on his, Navy, destroyer, cruiser, look around. He was like I don't know what the title is in the Navy for his, captain, or I don't know what he was, but he was high up there. Well, all that to say, we ran into one of their friends from our same university. It was break time, and she was out there and said, "Hey, look me up when you come." So anyway, Patrick, we're all four together now, and this girl was beautiful, and she hung out with us for the next day and a half, 2 days, and two of them, Kurt and her were good friends. But there came a moment where I realized, my the way I interact with her, I had to question, my motives, my heart, especially in front of them. You know, I could feel the attraction. We all could. I mean, she was, really fun and pretty. But when Kurt said, yeah, I've been really trying to get her to understand who Jesus really is. I mean, she says she's a Christian, but she doesn't have anything. Well, at that moment, if I would have said, oh, I would like to date her, yeah, I don't think that's the right model.
Mm-mm.
That's not the right role, because God calls us to something higher, right? And
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing
Well,
with you.
well, when he does that, that's what we're talking about is knowing. So, Patrick, you found yourself here. You're with these younger guys. Your faith has, gone through so many, moderations, changes, transformations over time to bring you to where you're at today. But you still have areas that you're sharing with these guys, right? That are like a little troubling still that you're working through.
Yeah, no, I think I had a lot of those. There was a lot of moments with that, and it was difficult to balance that of how do I try to disciple some of these guys, but also be vulnerable, you know?
So give us in sort of a wrap up, if you did, or if you could. Wh- what's the approach, the heart, the perspective? If there's a student out there that's listening and they're like, I want to be discipled, what would you tell them that their heart, they need to kind of put on and start doing or thinking about?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think the most important is they've got to be willing to be proactive and vulnerable. So they've got to like if they see someone, they're like, I want this person to disciple me. They have to be willing to go and ask, you know, because you can't always just expect people to, psychically pick it up or something like that. Um, and they have to, and to ask also requires being a little bit vulnerable because they have to be willing to, hear okay, maybe I can't this time or, something like that. Right. But, um, it's that pursuit and vulnerability, but I think it's also them having a seriousness with their own faith. Is that student has to be to the point where they're willing to be challenged in ways they might not like a lot of times. Because a discipler is going to push you. He's going to push you to do things that you maybe don't want to do or to take steps of faith that you won't want to take. So they have to have that ground of faith as well. They're willing to be challenged in pursuit of following the Lord.
Wow, that's great. So I heard you say they need to act. That is, they need to overcome the fear of just asking, right? And then when they do, they need to be willing to be authentic in how they approach that relationship.
Absolutely.
And at that point, when a person, let's say a listener right now, goes, all right, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna make the phone call, I'm gonna go, ask the question. I still remember, Patrick, not a lot of students, I mean, 400, they all think to themselves, the dude's busy, and I'll just send him an email. But man, I think you showed up in my office probably more than any kid I had before. And
Mm.
I think that was you showing that, hey, I'm going to just step out. If this guy rejects me and says he's busy, fine. But man, you showed a lot of initiative.
Oh yeah. I definitely remember that.
I know, and I remember telling my assistant, like, wait, Patrick again? No, not really. I never once said that. I always enjoyed our time. And then we also had a fun connection, didn't we? Like, well, you tell us what that connection is. I know my TA from years past was somebody that was related to you.
Yeah, so Julie Ripka, now Julie Slattery, was your TA, and now she's a psychologist as well that you teach on her books. So
I use your aunt's book. It's your aunt, right?
yes, my aunt.
And one day we're sitting there and the name, Patrick Flanigan, just a name to me. And I knew a kid in college very well named, well, I don't think it was Patrick. I can't remember his first name. It was Finnegan. But anyway, I would always think your name was Finnegan. But all of a sudden, we're talking, and I said, "Oh yeah, this is a good book." And you looked at me. It's a good book at some point that I use, and you looked at me and goes, "Oh yeah, I know the author." I go, "You know Julie Slattery?" And you go, "Yeah, that's my aunt. I remember that. That was awesome."
Oh, yeah.
But you
Crazy
showed
small
up.
world.
Yeah, but you showed up, Patrick. You asked, and then you were authentic in sharing about your life, your struggles, a girl you were dating, your thoughts about transferring. And I just, it takes a lot of courage. At that point, what then does it take in the heart and the soul of the person who wants to be a disciple? Or what would you say they need to start doing or thinking or getting ready for?
Yeah, so this is something that I take really personally because a passage that I think about all the time is Matthew 25, which is the sheep and the goats. And I think for the discipler, there's an element, or at least my personal experience, that I've been like, I'm always willing to be inconvenienced for someone that needs it, like as a Christian, right? Because I don't want to be the kind of guy that didn't feed Christ when he was hungry, or didn't clothe him when he was naked, or didn't visit him when he was in prison. And so I think it starts with that or a mentality of realizing that what we do for our brothers and sisters in Christ, we do for Christ. And so have that mentality of, okay, I'm willing to be inconvenienced because I'm not being inconvenienced for, this person. I'm being inconvenienced on behalf of the Lord that I serve. And so that's my personal stance that I live by. I don't know, I can't generalize it for everyone, but for me, that's been something that I've really adopted a lot, that I never want to be too busy that I can't be inconvenienced for Christ.
Wow, Patrick, what a great way and a great passage to go to, right? Jesus's words, "I was hungry and you didn't feed me." I mean, yeah, he was talking I guess he was using the idea of food, but it wasn't, bread he was talking about, was it?
No, I mean, you can make an interesting connection with when he tells Peter later, feed my sheep, right? And even earlier, he talks about, whichever of you give a glass of cold water to any of these people I'm sending out, like, you will never lose your reward. And there's an interesting, I mean, obviously you got some great theologians at Biola, so I'd be interested to hear what they say. But some people actually take that passage to be about ministry specifically, and like traveling ministers and traveling preachers, and others take it to be about kind of everyone who's poor or everyone who needs help. But I think really that the core of the passage is both. I mean, it's about people that bear Christ's name that need help from brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yeah. Man, I was poor and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me water. What a great model for, the guy that wants to go in and disciple. Now, he doesn't have to be, rich, right? In material things. He doesn't have to have it all together spiritually. He just has to have some water. And that is the water of life that's been given to him many times over. And wow, Patrick, give me your final thoughts on this whole idea, the heart of biblical discipleship.
Yeah, I think my final thought is I would just challenge anyone who's listening to find someone to disciple you, and then find someone to disciple. They talk a lot about how Paul had Timothy, but he also had Barnabas, who was discipling him at the time, right? And I think in every Christian, you want to have both of those relationships. You want to have a mentor and a mentee. And so I think my final thought would be to challenge anyone to be proactive in pursuing that, because I think it'll pay dividends on your spiritual growth if you find that.
Patrick, you're an inspiration. I wished I had, well, I had your heart as a young man about your age, but I just don't think I thought as deeply. I think I was more interested still in sports and girls, and not, involuntarily having to go to the police station. But I think, to see someone where you're at, where God has placed you, I just see wonderful, amazing things for you. I think think you're going to make a big impact in this world, in those that are in your circle, in that ever expanding circle. And I really just appreciate hearing your thoughts on something like this. So, Patrick, thank you for joining us on this Art of Relationships podcast, buddy.
And thank you for having me on. It's always a blessing to talk to you for sure.
It's always a blessing to talk to you as well. So if y'all want to see this and more, go to our cmr.biola.edu for all kinds of resources. And hey, thanks for watching this Art of Relationship podcast.
We're very glad you joined us for today's podcast. For more resources on marriage and healthy relationships, please visit our website at cmr.biola.edu. We'll see you next time on The Art of Relationships.